Logic Informal Fallacies Part 2. Fallacies of Personal Attack and Emotional Appeal. Fallacies of personal attack can be called ad hominem fallacies. Ad hominem is Latin for against the man or against the person. Ad hominem arguments attack a person making an argument or facts about their circumstances instead of giving a substantive reason to reject their argument. So by analogy, it's like a personal foul from sports. There are several different types of ad hominem arguments. The first is called ad hominem abusive. This is when you reject someone's argument or claim because of their flaws or traits. This could be personal, psychological, physical, etc. And it could also be not their actual traits, but alleged traits. Here's an example. Donald Trump is a liar and a narcissist. Therefore, we must reject his proposal to build a border wall. So even if it's true that Trump is a liar and a narcissist, if you assume that for the sake of argument, it still does not justify the conclusion. Someone could be a bad person and still have a true belief. So for example, Adolf Hitler thought that smoking is bad for you, and it is bad for you. And the fact that Adolf Hitler is a bad person does not give you any reason not to believe that it's bad for you. It does not undermine the claim at all. So ad hominem abusive is actually a very common fallacy. If you look at politics and the media, including social media, many, if not most arguments just fall into this ad hominem category. It's name calling and trying to basically associate the person giving an argument with bad traits and therefore making their claims allegedly less credible. But logically speaking, this entirely fails. Now, psychologically, this, like many other fallacies, can be quite effective. So you might think, well, fallacies work. They help you persuade people. The problem is we don't just care about persuading people or persuading ourselves. It also matters what's real, what's objectively true. And that's why we need to be able to recognize these fallacies, both when we give them and other people give them, so we can be more reliable discoverers of the truth. A second type of ad hominem is the circumstantial. An ad hominem circumstantial argument rejects someone's argument or their claim based on facts about their circumstances. So this can sometimes overlap or seem to overlap with the ad hominem abusive. The main difference is that instead of attacking someone's personal traits, you're attacking some fact about them or their life. So here's an example. Hillary Clinton's charitable foundation has received large donations from Middle Eastern nations. Therefore, you can't believe a word she says. So even if it's true that this has happened with her charity, the Clinton Foundation, that doesn't logically prove that any or all claims she makes are false. So it could bias her judgment with certain things, but keep in mind, even if someone is biased, a biased source, that alone does not logically guarantee that what they're saying is false. An example of that, you take your car into your mechanic and they tell you you need to replace the engine. And you might think, oh, they're just biased because I have to pay more money if they make me replace the engine. So I'm not going to believe what they tell me. You're making an ad hominem circumstantial fallacy here. It's true that the mechanic does have a bias in favor of charging more. However, that fact does not prove that your engine is okay and doesn't need to be replaced. It's possible they have the bias, but it's also true that your engine really does need to be replaced. So yeah, be careful when making this ad hominem circumstantial, especially when you're moving from a claim that a person must be biased from their circumstances and then concluding, well, their conclusion must be false just based on that. Biases are good to be aware of, and it's good to be wary, maybe to partially discount the probability of someone's claims based on their circumstances. But someone's circumstances or their potential bias doesn't guarantee their claim is false. A third type of ad hominem is called poisoning the well. This can appear similar to ad hominem abusive or circumstantial. However, what's distinctive about it is that the poisoning the well fallacy applies to a person's claim or argument before they've had a chance to give any evidence for it, before they've had a chance to make their arguments. You're trying to inoculate their potential audience and say, just don't believe anything they say. You can't trust them, so don't even listen to their evidence. This can be quite toxic to debate because you're basically not allowing someone to defend themselves or their beliefs. Here's an example. Monsanto, which is a corporation, profits from the sale of GMO crops. GMO is genetically modified organism. Therefore, you can ignore all of their research on the safety of GMOs. So Monsanto is a corporation, not a person. That brings up another point, which is that the ad hominem fallacies are generally directed towards individual people. However, they can also be directed against organizations, and the fallacies are classified the same. Now, this is a nice example because it's true that Monsanto does have a bias. They want their crops to be perceived as safe and as nutritious, etc. So they do have a standing reason to portray their crops as safe, even if they may not be. However, that fact alone does not guarantee that all of their research is worthless or false. It's possible that GMOs really are safe, even if the company that makes them has an incentive to portray them as safe regardless. So we need to be more critical thinkers and look at actual evidence rather than just stopping at a bias or a presumed bias based on circumstances and ignoring all the evidence. Tu quoque is a fourth type of ad hominem fallacy. It's when you accuse an opponent of hypocrisy in order to reject their claim or their conclusion, instead of giving a new substantive reason to reject their claim or conclusion. Here's an example. Government officials in the US have accused Vladimir Putin of assassinating his political enemies. But the United States has also killed people in foreign wars. So if you basically say that because the US has engaged in similar behavior, therefore Putin didn't, this is a fallacious argument. Just because the person making the accusation did something similar or the same thing does not prove their accusation is false. So this is a very common tactic used rhetorically when trying to persuade people, and it's often quite effective. But logically, it's worthless. It's a total non-starter. So, for example, just because you're a murderer or a thief doesn't mean if you accuse someone else of being a murderer or a thief, you're wrong. Maybe you're both murderers and thieves. So pay attention to the actual claim being made and the evidence for it, rather than the status of the person making the claim, whether they've engaged in something similar themselves. So now let's move on to fallacies based on emotional appeals. So these fallacies, what they have in common is they try to trigger or appeal to an audience's emotions and get those emotions moving positively or negatively in a certain direction, rather than giving substantive reasons. A substantive reason is one that actually helps justify a claim. And this is very common. It is very effective. So psychologically, if you want to persuade people, oftentimes appealing to their emotions work. Once again, though, the problem is it gives you no real guarantee that what you're convincing people of is true. So this is a huge problem because even if you can ignore reality and truth to a certain extent, you cannot ignore it forever. It'll eventually catch up to you or to your audience. So the first type of appeal to emotion we'll discuss is called appeal to the people or ad populum. So ad populum is just Latin for to the people. And an ad populum argument says that a person should believe something because they will fit in with a group. So it appeals to their desire to join in or fit in. And this is a very profound human motivation. We're social creatures, so we like to have a sense of solidarity and connectedness with others. There's at least 3 sub-varieties of appeal to people fallacy. One is just a general desire to maintain group solidarity. So this is oftentimes used to create solidarity of an in-group against an out-group. So you want to be with us or with the good people and not with them, with the bad people. Secondly, there's what's called the bandwagon effect. So this is maybe the most common type of appeal to the people. It's when you appeal to someone's desire to belong to something that's popular, that a lot of people like. A third type of appeal to the people is a bit more subtle. It's saying not necessarily that the majority of people believe this or like this, nor that everyone in your in-group believes it or likes it, but rather it's appealing to an elite or high status group in society. The elites like something or believe something. If you try to use that itself as a reason to get someone else to believe it, it's the appeal to the people fallacy. So here's an example. iPhones are the most popular smartphone. Therefore, you should buy an iPhone. So maybe iPhones are the most popular because they're the best, or maybe they're just popular because people imitate what other people do, or for some other reason, they have the best ad campaign, who knows? So the mere fact that the majority or many people or the best people or our people believe or do something doesn't prove it's correct. Appeal to pity or ad misericordiam appeals to an audience's sympathy or compassion rather than giving them a substantive reason to believe something. Here's an example. If I get a B in this course, then I could lose my scholarship. Therefore, I deserve an A. Even if a person is justified in having someone's sympathy or compassion for the prospect of losing a scholarship, it doesn't prove, for example, that they deserve an A in the class. And you can see this being used quite often, just like the other emotional appeals. It's quite powerful because almost all human beings have a capacity for empathy and compassion, except for perhaps, I guess, sociopaths or psychopaths. Another appeal to emotion is the ad baculum, or appeal to fear or force. Ad baculum is Latin for appeal to the stick, i.e. a stick or club you could use to beat someone with. This argument threatens harm to the audience unless they agree to believe something or agree to follow a course of action. So here's an example. If you don't earn straight A's on your next report card, then you will not be allowed to spend time with your friends for a month. Therefore, you should earn straight A's on your next report card. Even if it's true that they should earn straight A's on their next report card, this is not a good logical reason for that claim. This fallacy is oftentimes just called the appeal to force. However, it's often used to refer to cases where the person speaking may not threaten violence per se, but they could threaten some other harm to a person's interest. As in this example, the person making the argument, presumably a parent, is threatening not allowing their child to spend time with their friends. So technically that's not a threat of violence, but it is a threat to the student's interests. So let's do some sample problems where we're given an argument and we have to identify what fallacy it commits. Your next vacation should be in Dubai because that is where the world's elite love to party. This is the ad populum fallacy, or appeal to the people. And this is the sub-variety where you're appealing not to the majority or to the in-group, but rather to the social elites or high-status people. You spend most of your time in your room reading books. When I was your age, I played all types of sports. So if you don't start joining some teams, then I won't give you any more money to buy books, and I'll tear up your library card. This is the ad baculum, or appeal to fear or force. My father says I should quit smoking because it's bad for the lungs. He's one to talk. He smoked for 30 years before he quit. This is the ad hominem tu quoque. And the phrase tu quoque basically means you as well. Just because someone is a hypocrite or inconsistent between their statements and actions doesn't mean their statements are false. Yes, she threw your cell phone in the toilet, but she had a rough childhood, so we must excuse her behavior. This is the ad misericordiam, or appeal to pity. Even if someone does in fact deserve your compassion, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should excuse their behavior or accept some other claim being made about them or their circumstances. Jenny says that the new Star Wars land at Disneyland is not worth the money, but you can't trust her because she was fired from Disneyland after they closed the petting zoo. This is the ad hominem circumstantial. It's not attacking Jenny's character or some physical trait of hers, but some fact about her past, her employment record. So that would be the circumstantial variety of ad hominem. Bernie Sanders is a privileged old white man. Therefore, you should not believe him when he says the best health care policy is Medicare for all. This is the ad hominem abusive because it's attacking someone's personal traits or identity. So attacking someone's identity as a way of undermining their position or the evidence that they're giving for their position is ad hominem abusive, as opposed to the ad hominem circumstantial. Circumstantial, rather than attacking their direct personal traits, characteristics, or identity, will rather attack someone's claim based on some general fact about their life or circumstances. Next up, part 3, weak inductive argument fallacies.